Hello friends, my name is Emile and welcome back to another ETCC recap, this time taking a look at rounds 7 and 8 that took place on the Nurburgring GP Course on the 30th of June 2017. As always, if you'd like to get involved in ETCC, or more specifically in the final round, which is coming up on the 7th of July, there is a video in the description that will tell you how to sign up to the ETCC. Overall though, we was hoping the Nurburgring GP course, being a wider course, would produce more clean racing, unlike Lime Rock, which was a little bit of a mess. Anyways, let's take a look at the starting grid. On pole position we had Blitz Skyline R34 in the Bay Racing Volkswagen Scirocco GTO Out Nowhere in the 306 Racing Peugeot 308. Prod EKR in the privateer Honda Civic Si, with Invisible AK in the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco. CR27 Gaming in the CR27 Racing Lexus IS350. Harry K5, the Pinketeer, in 6th place. Me, I got a pretty good position, unlike most times on here with the reverse gear Autosport Ford Focus. DJ Uko in the Speed Trap Motorsports Mazda 3. Racing Art GT in the privateer Subaru Impreza. Prod Forza 4 AMG in the Prod Racing 235i. Afternoon 7 in the Aerodynamics 235i, with Rhino GT4 rounding out the BMWs in the Team SFR BMW M235i. Microlin 100 in the Max Power Racing Scirocco, and finally we had a GMT 1996 in the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza. As we get underway here at the Nürburgring, we will follow aboard the Bay Racing Volkswagen Scirocco for the first part of this course. One thing I did notice, Nürburgring GP has not very good camera angles, so trying to show this is a little bit awkward. It sort of mainly hooks onto the first car. However, surprisingly enough though, through the first corner everything was relatively clean. Everyone was sort of expecting the first corner of Nürburgring to be a little bit of an issue, but we didn't really have any. There was a couple of issues coming into this corner here. The Civic got a bit of a bump, which meant that the 306 Racing Peugeot 308 would go out a bit wide, but, you know, so far so good. So, pretty much clean. The Bay Racing Scirocco would drop back slightly, with Prod EKR and Invisible AK taking positions 1 and 2, but he certainly was not going to give them up that easily as he goes on the chase. The Sciroccos we were assuming were going to be pretty good cars here. They do have a straight line speed advantage. There is quite a lot of straights here at the Nürburgring GP. But we wasn't really sure how they would do getting out the corners. Of course, the Sciroccos do suffer from a fair bit of understeer, unlike, say, the Civic, which is a relatively controlled car. A couple of other cars that could do well here, the BMWs, because they get a really good drive out the corner, as do the Peugeots, as we see the Civic and this Scirocco sort of running to ride into this flowing corner here. I apologise, I don't know the corner names for Nürburgring GP. GTO Out Nowhere, despite being bumped a little bit earlier, is sort of looking at a way past the Bay Racing Scirocco. Once again, for whatever reason, he is very, very, very quick on the first lap of these courses, gets a great launch and always ends up competing with the top spot when it comes to the first lap, but eventually will fall back. The Civic, as you see, does get involved in the tyre wall a little bit there, which is a bit unfortunate. We were seeing a couple of incidences with that tyre wall, although as far as I'm aware no one actually got bumped into it. It's mostly just people sort of outbraking themselves into that corner. As we see the Bay Racing Scirocco try to get round the 306 Racing Peugeot 308 with his straight line speed, and that will allow him to go on the inside into the next corner. Falling back a little bit though, we do once again join the Civic, and well, we're once again on board with Prod in the BMW. Now, he didn't have the best of first laps. There was a fair bit of bumping involving him. In fact, this would be a slightly unlucky race for him as a whole. But as you can see, the grid sort of split off. You know, you sort of had the top 4 or 5 people who basically ran towards the front, while the rest of us sort of got split into this little pack, and you'll see sort of the 3 and 4 out of that sort of main battle had sort of fallen back as well. So you can see the 306 Racing Peugeot 308 and the Bay Racing Scirocco, who would eventually battle themselves towards this sort of pact here. However, this pack is certainly not a bad place to be. We did have some pretty good racing here as the two Prod guys try to get up the Subaru Impreza. Civic has a little bit of a moment, which unfortunately would push the Prod BMW out. However, as we do know, he is a very quick driver, very consistent driver, and he would be looking to stare right at the back of that pack once again shortly. The privateer Subaru Impreza would have a pretty good showing here, battling with the Max Power Racing Scirocco here. The Impreza we've sort of said about the Impreza before, out of all the rear-wheel drive cars, this is probably the most normal of all of them. It doesn't really have any advantages, but it is a pretty good car. The two Volkswagens do start slowing each other down into this flowing corner, which means that the Impreza can get right on their tail again. Of course, the Impreza is a better handling car through the corners than the Sciroccos, but when they get onto straight, unless the Impreza gets a really good run, he is going to have some issues. You can sort of see here, he did get a good run off that corner. In fact, very good through the chicane there. Really very good drive, actually, from the Impreza there. Although he does unfortunately outbrake himself a little bit coming into this sort of last chicane section, which would open him up to me in my Ford Focus. I wouldn't have the greatest of races here either, but at least for this first half, it wasn't going too badly. Later on, I did end up having some issues. But of course, as previously, that does open the Impreza up to me, and well, if you've been following the ETCC, you will know me and this privateer Impreza usually get into some pretty hard-fought battles. Everyone goes slow into that first corner. Everyone had sort of a different line through that first corner. You'll sort of see guys like Prod and so on take a very wide line through there, which does allow them to get a lot of speed up on the end at sort of the cost of distance. They have to go a lot further around, while as I was just trying to take the shortest line possible. I didn't really practice for the Nurburgring GP. I'm not hugely quick at this track either, which doesn't particularly help. We are now on board the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza. Despite starting in last place, he did manage to make his way up the field of the slightly slower drivers, and as you can see now, he was staring right at the back of both me and Prod Forza 4 AMG. Of course, the Prod BMW would find his way around me pretty easily. Sort of went for a sort of spot that everyone was sort of favouring. This sort of 180 turn. If you get them on the brakes, you can go up the inside. I tried it a few times with varying degrees of success. There is sort of a fine margin of error on there. You can get it wrong and go out onto the sand, as the Impreza does go around the outside of me. The Impreza just got the better run through the corners, and that's really what the rear-wheel drive cars can do through sort of the mid-speed corners. They can get a better run than the front-wheel drive cars. Granted, in my personal opinion, sort of through the lower speed corners, front-wheel drive cars are a little bit better at getting out of them, and even the higher speed corners. But for you sort of middle-of-the-road corners, the rear-wheel drive cars are very, very quick coming out of them. Now that he had a dispatchade of me, he was looking towards the front of the field. Very good line through that chicane there. You can see the Bay Racing Scirocco gone a little bit wide. That was sort of a common thing as well. Just sort of taking a little bit too much speed into the chicane, not hitting the tyre barrier, but sort of through the second half of it, you will just take too much speed and end up out wide. The pack gets a little bit more spread out, but nevertheless, we are still fairly stuck together coming down this main straight. As we go once again into the first corner, there is a lot of cars going into the first corner. Again, Jimmy seems to opt for the title line, which is the line that I personally was going for. It's the line that I'd recommend. Bay Racing Scirocco behind the privateer Subaru Imprezas, as the Subaru Imprezas were looking to start a battle with each other. The Bay Racing Scirocco would go a little bit wide on that corner. Again, with the Scirocco's understeer, that is not surprising. A little bit of contact there, but nothing too major. I mean, ultimately that probably affected the Impreza more than it did the Scirocco, because the Scirocco's got front-wheel drive and can just spin his way back up. Of course, though, that does mean that I end up on the rear end of the Scirocco and the Impreza, bump the Impreza out a little bit wide. The problem is, if my Focus starts understeering, there really is nothing you can do to stop it from doing that. It will just plow itself through. There really isn't too much to do there. Tries to get me on brakes into the chicane. It goes pretty well for him though. However, it does mean that I can sort of start looking at the inside for there. But of course, as we previously described, the Impreza does get a better run out of the corners. I wasn't really sure what to do through this flowing section. I couldn't really get my line on there. Falling a bit further back, we see the aerodynamics BMW, who I believe would be involved in some incidents at the start of the race and fall back. He would find the Speed Trap Motorsports Mazda 3. The Mazda 3 pretty average as far as the front wheel drive cars go. These guys had a pretty good battle here. They definitely do have the room, which is nice. It's nice when you sort of have room to breathe and you don't have to worry about other cars around you. It's just a straight race. Mazda looking in his rearview mirror trying to stop the BMW from passing, and the BMW looking to get around the Mazda. Does get a tighter line through that corner, which does mean the BMW can try to advance on. But as you can see, these guys are going too wide. The BMW would just get past into that flowing section. May have been a slight amount of contact there between him and the Mazda. The Mazda would have a couple of more issues just trying to keep control of that car, but he would eventually do so. Yeah, you do have to be careful through that sort of fast-flowing chicane. You can take it flat out pretty easily, and it's a very exhilarating feeling when you can, but you do have to make sure you are clear of other cars. Not quite sure what position this was for. I believe this was towards the front of the pack. We had Prod EKR in the Privateer Civic battling with the Max Power Racing Scirocco. Two fairly sort of competitive drivers here. Admittedly, the Max Power Racing Scirocco maybe has the slight consistency, but the Civic, as we have seen in the previous round, it was in Lime Rock when it made its debut. The Civic is not to be messed with. The Civic is actually a pretty quick car, especially within the right hands. Coming into that first corner, the Scirocco looks to try and make the dive up the inside, but he's simply too far back to really do anything about that as they come around that corner pretty nicely. Neither car really gets the advantage coming out of that corner. They're both front wheel drive. Again, as I've said, the Civic is the best handling of the front wheel drive cars in my opinion, so maybe that gave him a slight advantage through the corner, but coming out the corner there really would not have been too much between these vehicles. As we go into another flowing section, I kind of like Nurburgring GP for its sort of fast flowing corners. They are quite nice, but again, unfortunately for me in the Focus, and unfortunately for quite a few of the front wheel drive cars, save for maybe the Scirocco, they are a little bit of an issue, so the rear wheel drive cars can just get a better drive out of the corners. However, the Civic would fairly keep his place locked down for now, as much as the Scirocco does look to get around, does get a very good run out that corner, but he would not be able to make the move stick. As we follow a little bit further back, everyone, or sort of the top half of the pack starting on lap 2 would get involved in they would start splitting away, and we would sort of be in the bottom half. It's me, Rhino GT4, and the Bay Racing Scirocco, which went into the tire wall. We would see a pretty good battle between the 306 Racing Peugeot 308 and the Team SFR BMW. Of course, these guys have battled before Brands Hatch. They had a very good Russell and a tussle, so this was bound to be a pretty interesting fight. Peugeot better through the corners, BMW slightly better on the straights. As we come in to that chicane, the Peugeot looking to make the most of its handling advantage. BMW does get it a little bit wrong through there. Will he look for a dive? Not really close enough to do so. This sort of section of the track is a bit of a tricky one. It is very slow speed turns. You do have to be aware of that, and if you push it even a couple mile an hour too fast, the car will just understeer wide, as we did see from the Peugeot as he starts hanging back. Rhino GT4 starts looking at my rear bumper in my reverse gear Autosport Ford Focus. However, the Peugeot not completely done yet, looking to get some pretty good lines through these corners here. I do like the Peugeot, actually. As far as sort of the driving cars here in the ETCC, this is, if I wasn't running my Focus, the 308 would definitely be a consideration for me, because I do personally quite like the way it does drive. As we sort of see coming into this 180 corner, Rhino looking to make the move on my Focus, that would dive him up the inside through these chicanes, which would give him a pretty easy pass. The front wheel drive Focus would have issues. However, not as many issues as the Peugeot, apparently, which does decide to have a little bit of an oversteery moment. It does happen. Of course, you can be the best handling rear-wheel drive car in the world if you like, and you will still have some issues. Further back, the Bay Racing Scirocco would fall back thanks to that incident with the tyre wall, and you just want to have a very good next lap, which would allow the Pinketeer to try and make a position. The newly liveried Pinketeer, which looks a little bit odd now. Of course, you'll notice the Team SFR BMW is now blue instead of red, and there's a couple of other slight livery changes. There always is in these races, so I'm sort of getting to the point where I don't really even need to document them. But the Pinketeer going for a new bold look. Pinker-greeneteer? I don't know. I'll probably call it that from now on because it is very much a car of two halves now. However, he would look to get around the Bay Racing Scirocco no matter his livery. Of course, the Scirocco better on the straights, Focus better through the corners. Little bit of a bump there. Did look a little bit like a lag bump. Either that or the Bay Racing Scirocco just took that sort of first corner a little bit too slow. That hairpin is quite a nasty one, as it does turn out. But yeah, these guys would have a pretty solid battle down here in sort of the lower mid-card. Speaking of lower mid-card, we would find the CR27 Lexus, which unfortunately would sort of... I couldn't get the livery to load in this replay, so apologies to you, CR27. It's fine for the next race, your livery is loaded, but for whatever reason just wouldn't load on this one, which the liveries when they don't load look kind of weird. It sort of looks like an old television, really, with this sort of Technicolor Dreamcoat going on. But either way, the afternoon 7 in the Team Aerodynamics BMW would find the Lexus. I believe he managed to eventually dispatch completely of the Speed Track Motorsports Master 3, which would allow him to sort of gain a position on there. I believe this was for around 10th position. So these guys are essentially battling to keep within the points. Of course, points cut-off is 10th place, where you earn 1 point, and then that's the end of that. So there you go. Anyways, while it may have been an action-packed race further back, it wouldn't be hugely action-packed for our winner. Invisible AK, unsurprisingly, would score pole position, making him a 3-time champion winner of the ETCC. Drove a consistent race, managed to get rid of the car behind him, and ultimately just managed to drive away. We knew the Scirocco's would be quick around here, and the fact that Invisible AK came up to a pole, not hugely surprising, of course, as we know. AK is a very, very competent driver, especially when he is behind the wheel of the almighty Scirocco. As he goes for a little bit of showboating across the line, you can sort of see second position there coming in to Focus. A little bit further back, though, the battles would be a little bit more hefty. I was trying to desperately escape from the 308 in order to score the maximum amount of points that I could. Rhino GT4 would end up just driving away from me. However, I would battle with the Peugeot. However, unfortunately, Peugeot was just a little bit too far back to really make a move. That being said, though, I do go a little bit wide on the exit of that corner. Not the best run, but the Peugeot simply would not have a good enough run to really take advantage of that, and he wouldn't be as close. However, yeah, still a pretty good battle, and had the straight been a little bit longer, I have a sneaking suspicion the Peugeot would have probably had me. And of course, as you can see, when the driver tiles take over, the Peugeot does, because the driver tiles take a very, very stupid line through that corner for some reason. On to the results for round 7 then, and Invisible AK of the EVR Scirocco would take first place, with Prod EKR and the Privateer Civic being 8 seconds behind him. The Max Power Racing Scirocco would gain 3rd place, with Prod Forza AMG in the Prod BMW gaining 4th, one of his worst results of the season so far, but it's still a pretty damn good result to come 4th. GBT 1996 in the Underground Racing Subaru would have a very, very good race indeed, gaining 5th place, just in front of Racing Heart GT in the other Subaru Impreza, gaining 6th place, so a good showing for the Subarus in round 7 then. Rhino GT4 Team SFR BMW would claim 7th place, with me claiming 8th place in the reverse gear Autosport Ford Focus. GT Nowhere, with some starting casualties sort of falling back through the field, would end up in 9th in the 306 Racing Peugeot 308. Blitzsky R34 would round round out the points in the Bay Racing Volkswagen Scirocco. The rest of the field as followed: in 11th place, Harry K5 in the Pinketia, 12th place, Afternoon 7 in the Team Aerodynamics BMW, CR27 Gaming in the CR27 Racing Lexus IS350, and rounding out the field is the Speed Trap Motorsports Mazda 3 of DJ Yuko. So, a pretty good race, pretty clean race. However, what would it be like going on to round 8? Let's take a look at the starting grid. Here is the starting grid for round 8 then. Rhino GT4 in the Team SFR BMW M235i would start on pole. CR27 Gaming in the CR27 Racing Lexus IS350. GMT 1996 in the Underground Racing Super Impreza with Racing Hard GT in the Privateer Super Impreza just behind him. Prod Forza 4 AMG in the Prod BMW, up from GTO out of nowhere in the 306 Racing Peugeot 308. Bullet Skyline R54 in the Bay Racing Volkswagen Scirocco Afternoon 7 in the Team Aerodynamics BMW M235i. Michael in 100 in the Max Power Racing Volkswagen Scirocco. Prod EKR in the Honda Civic Si Privateer. Invisible AK in the Elite Virtual Racing Volkswagen Scirocco. Harry K5 in the Pinker Greener tier, starting in 12th. Me starting in 13th, Unlucky in the Reverse Gear Autosport Ford Focus, DJ Yuko in the Speed Trap Motorsports Mazda 3, and HP Pinder would return for this round, being absent from round 7 and being rewarded for his absence by starting in last place. And we are underway for round 8 of the ETCC. Now, just like round number 7, it is a 7-lap race. However, you might have noticed it is now wet here at the Nurburgring GP, which is certainly going to make things quite interesting, as we saw at Sebring. A couple of collisions through the first couple of corners, not quite as clean as it was in round 7. However, that is to be expected. People getting used to driving in the wet once again, because wet driving does certainly affect the characteristics of the car. Also, doesn't help that Nurburgring GP is one of the most vicious wet courses in the game. You know, Sebring had 1 or 2 nasty puddles. This track has a lot more of them. Most of them are on inside lines where you'd actually genuinely want to drive. One of the worst puddles on the track is here. You can sort of see it covering the inside line, and unfortunately it would lead to a slight collision here. The Privateer Super Impreza going a little bit wide on that puddle. Prod tried to slow down, and unfortunately Invisible AK, who had nowhere to go, would slam straight into the back of the Prod BMW. While luckily no one was seriously injured in that crash, there was no real major catastrophes with the car, it would unfortunately set the Prod BMW back in positions. However, as we come around the 180 corner, I would also make a slight cock-up. I would go wham straight into the back of the Peugeot. Luckily, the Peugeot was absolutely fine. Luckily, I was absolutely fine as well. Which I'm quite thankful for, because I would have felt quite bad if I'd managed to ruin his race with that. Basically, I was just trying to use the same braking points I did for round 7, and that doesn't really work around here when it is raining, and that would set me back a little bit, and it would also put the Prod BMW right on my tailbone. As we're following the 306 Racing Peugeot 308, looking to get around the Bay Racing Volkswagen Scirocco. Yeah, the Peugeot in the wet would of course be the slightly more tricky cars. Of course, the rear-wheel drive cars are going to be the trickier cars to drive in the wet, because while a rear-wheel drive car in the wet is prone to oversteering, while a front-wheel drive car is prone to understeering, which isn't too bad in the rain. You can sort of sort understeer out a lot better than you can oversteer. The Prod BMW would get around me, but I would dive up the inside of him for chicane 2, which I managed to come across pretty fine in. The Peugeot would take kind of a wide line into here. I would try to capitalise on that, sort of go up the inside. However, I just simply didn't have the distance or the speed on my side, and that would once again open me up to another prod attack, one from the BMW. Peugeot now starting to come slightly more into our battle pack, starting to split away from the main pack, which is going on down there. I sort of knew the Prod BMW was going to make a dive right up the inside of that corner, so I decided to sort of let him have it, because I knew I would be on the inside line for the second corner, and I do successfully manage to do that. Decided not to make a dive into this corner, which is a pretty wise thing. I would try to get around the Peugeot, try going up the outside on the next corner. It didn't really work, and ultimately the BMW would end up overtaking me. Towards the front of the field, The Underground Racing Subaru Impreza was looking to have another good showing within this race. Having a little battle here with the Elite Virtual Racing Volkswagen Scirocco. Prodigy KH going out wide there in the Privateer Civic. This was up towards the top of the field. I believe this was the battle for second or third place here. Of course, CR27 Racing is currently leading this battle. However, he would go a little bit wide into the 180 turn, allowing Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco to get up the inside of him, and it would also give the Underground Racing Subaru a nice gap to put itself through, because of course if someone's going to open the door, you may as well be kind enough to go through it before closing it, as he would now go ahead to try and battle with the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco, trying to get him on brakes around this corner. However, it doesn't really work doing that around this corner, because it's more of a sort of flowing corner. So sort of trying to sort of be on the inside there's fine, but you're going to be on the outside for the next corner, which is arguably a better overtaking spot. Through here, once again, as we described in round 7, it is completely flat out around there, even in the rain. Although you do get some more hair-raising moments when it comes to that corner. In front-wheel drive cars, you understeer more, and in the rear-wheel drive cars, yeah, it's also not particularly fun. The Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco would run a little bit wide, allowing the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza to gain that position. A little bit further back, and while it was a little bit more of a lonely race, there were still some battles going on here. As you can see, the the Pinker Greener tier, as I should say, and the Team Aerodynamics BMW were having a little battle of their own back here. Of course, we saw this in round 7, those two having a little bit of a scuffle, a little bit of a punt wide there, although that ultimately doesn't really affect things. The Focus is going to maintain the inside line for this, and the BMW will try to go around the outside of that puddle, which is really something you don't want to do. That puddle being in the middle of the road really does make you choose, you know, you've got to either go up the inside or the outside. You really do not want to go straight through the puddle, which is the mistake a couple of people can make. Speaking of mistakes, the Pinketeer would run slightly wide, leading him to try, or leading the Aerodynamics BMW to try and attempt an overtake, but eventually the Pinketeer would get the spot back. On board with the Bay Racing Volkswagen Scirocco now, who would be holding up quite an angry pack of cars, although admittedly one of those cars decided to get angry with him and just punt him. He would sort of start gatekeeping the bottom half of this pack. The top half, you know, the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza, the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco, the Max Power Scirocco, and I believe one more car started to sort of run away towards the sort of top end of the pack, so that's sort of split it in two. You can see the Prod BMW defending from the 306 Racing Peugeot 308 there, and the CR27 Racing Lexus IS350. Well, he may have sort of started dropping some positions. He certainly was not looking to give them up without a fight starting to look like he was going to get involved in this little battle here, just sort of keeping the rear end. Unfortunately, he would bump into Prod, which is a bit of an issue. And also, you may notice the 306 Racing Peugeot 308 would disappear. Unfortunately, he would be taken out of this race due to a connection issue, which is a little bit of a shame. However, one car that certainly was not looking to be taken out of this race is the Privateer Subaru Impreza. He was sort of caught in the sort of top half of that battle pack we saw earlier, as the two Volkswagens are starting to try and split. You'll see the other Subaru is trying to get involved, so basically we was looking to have two Volkswagens having a battle and two Subarus. The Subaru, though, obviously not looking to battle with the other Subaru, decided that he would try to catch up to the Volkswagens and not really worry about the Underground Racing Impreza that is currently approaching his rearview mirror. He also decides to take the sort of wider line around that corner. That's probably one of the best lines I've seen through that corner. And he would go around the outside for this corner, which is sort of ill-advised, but he does manage to pull it off, and manages to even get a wheel in the puddle without too much difficulty. And some pretty good couple of corners there would allow him to go right onto the back of the Volkswagens that were having their own battle, of course. Again, a little bit further towards the back, we join the Pinder Peugeot, who was defending from the Speed Trap Motorsports Mazda 3 as well, usual. The Mazda 3, while the driver may not be the quickest, certainly does get involved in quite a few of these sort of further back battles, sort of seems to be the gatekeeper of these further back battles. However, the Pinder Peugeot would try to make an escape. It seems to lock up the wheels quite a bit on this Peugeot. I'm not really sure as to why that is, but for whatever reason this driver seems to lock up the brakes a little bit during his braking sessions, but it doesn't seem to affect the Peugeot that much. Towards the front of the pack, and well, it was Rhino GT4 who had completely split away from the rest of the pack. Admittedly, you can still see him in the background, however, starting on pole, managing to get out of the way before any of the serious collisions happened. He was looking to secure himself a lead. Of course, as we saw at Lime Rock, Rhino is perfectly capable of being in first position. However, unfortunately at Lime Rock, he would just receive a bit of an incident on the last couple of laps, and that would eventually allow a car to overtake him, putting him in second place. Of course, bearing that in mind, he was looking to maintain his lead and looking to ultimately get a sort of first place win within this race. Once again, joining the battle pack for third or fourth position, we have the Prod BMW, of course receiving some minor incidents earlier on in the race. However, now he was looking to extract his revenge, having got around the two Imprezas. He was looking to catch up to the Civic and eventually looking to take on the Sciroccos at the front of the field. As you see, some cars going off a little bit wide there, I believe, in the distance. However, it wouldn't really affect them. You see a couple of cars sort of end up in that sand trap over there, and it can really affect your performance. However, if you're further enough forward, it isn't that big a deal. You know, you can usually recover it within 5 seconds, which if you've got a 5-second lead on someone, that's absolutely fine. You can sort of see the Civic trying to escape away from the BMW, but the BMW is doing everything in its power to try and catch up. The other Subaru dropped back. I didn't actually see what happened there. Once again, joined in the back of the field, and well, I had now joined this battle. The Pinker Greener had caught up to the Pinder Peugeot, and I was looking to make my way up the field. This would not be a very good race for me. I would have some issues sort of in the lower card of the points, and eventually my control batteries would run out, which essentially means I have no feeling whatsoever of what my car was doing. Instead of carrying on the race, because I was already feeling I was much slower around the track, I decided I would try to pull over and change batteries as quick as I could. Admittedly, it did still take about 20-30 seconds to do, so I was right at the back of this pack. In fact, you might have seen my car pulled over earlier on. And unfortunately, the story of my race here would essentially be me gaining positions on these guys and then somehow managing to throw it away. As you saw, I sort of went wide on that chicane there, and that would give these two guys the positions back. Although, admittedly, it would still be a pretty good battle. Speaking of good battles, the Civic had managed to catch up to these two Volkswagens, who were battling for second place amongst each other. The Prod BMW would unfortunately take a little bit of a step back in all of this. However, we are aboard the Max Power Racing Scirocco that was sort of trying to blank that Civic out of his mind and just maintain pace and try to get around the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco. Of course, as we've seen in the past, the Max Power Racing Scirocco driver is the slightly more consistent of the two, but Invisible AK is the slightly quicker. So it really is an interesting battle here. You sort of see the lagged out corpse of the Peugeot there, similar to what we had in a bunch of the other races. We've had those lagged out corpse cars. It does happen occasionally. Of course, though, as these two are battling, as the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco is trying to keep the Max Power Racing Scirocco off its tail, it is letting that Civic catch up, and that Civic is now sort of in striking distance, if he wants to be. He's sort of just biding his time, waiting for these two guys to slow each other down a little bit more before he decides to make his pouncing move. As we'd see them go around the second chicane, of course, the Civic is going to be the quicker car out of that chicane just by virtue of it being the better handling car, and he is right on the tail of the Max Power Racing Scirocco. Maybe trying to go around the outside there, unfortunately it really would not work out. So we know, you know, the Volkswagens are the quicker car and there wasn't really enough space there either So the Scirocco's would continue on down the straight. The Civic, though, despite being the slowest front-wheel drive car, actually managed to stick with the Scirocco's pretty well. I believe that car might have one of the better gearboxes of the entire field. I believe my Focus actually has the sort of closest ratio box of all the cars, but I don't think the Civic is that far off either. As the Civic now really looks to take advantage of the Max Power Racing Scirocco, the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco is starting to make some ground, because now the Max Power driver has got to worry about this Civic, which is all over his rear end. And while these two guys are slowing down, it is meaning the Prod BMW is catching up to them as well. The Privateer Subaru Impreza would fall behind the Underground Racing Subaru, who would go for Drift-Do of the Night by the looks of it. Once again, there's some rather interesting drifting skills on display. He probably earns the that award tonight. There was no real drifting action going on in this race, luckily. The Underground Racing Subaru and the Privateer Subaru would get into a little bit of a tussle once again. We sort of saw this in round 7, these two guys battling, and they certainly were not finished with each other yet, trading positions as the race went on. Now, of course, after that slight issue in the puddle, the Privateer Subaru is quite a fair away from the Underground Racing Impreza. However, of course, he is certainly not willing to just let him out of his sights that easily. While these two may technically be teammates when it comes to the manufacturer's rankings, they certainly are not when it comes to the actual racing of each other. However, gaining first place for the first time in the ETCC would be a Rhino GT4, finally managing to secure that first place victory. He would, again, as said previously, just drive away from the rest of the field, have a good race, have a consistent race, stay out of trouble. While the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco was starting to catch, there was nothing he could really do unless Rhino made a mistake, but luckily Rhino did not. He stayed consistent, stayed true, and he would chalk up Team SFR's first win of the ETCC, making it so I believe we've had 4 separate winners now the ETCC, which is pretty good when you consider the caliber of driver on offer here. So congratulations to you, sir, on finally securing that win, as the driver's arse would take control of the vehicles and have a really bollocks line through that first corner. Anyways, on to the actual racing results, and as previously said, it would be Rhino GT4 who would take the top spot for Team SFR. Invisible AK in the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco, though, came in second, just 2 seconds behind him. Prod EKR would end up winning against the Max Power Racing Scirocco, securing 3rd place, while the Scirocco would fall to 4th place. Prod Forza 4 AMG would have another slightly disappointing result, considering his usual pace, going into 5th. This just really was not his weekend for racing. The Underground Racing Subaru Impreza would have a pretty good result once again, finishing 6th, with a Racing Heart GT in the Privateer Subaru Impreza coming in 7th. Those Subarus are apparently glued together. But Skyline R34, the Bay Racing Volkswagen Scirocco, would have a pretty good result as well, finishing 8th, which I believe is his best points position so far in the ETCC. CR27 Gaming, the CR27 Racing Lexus IS350, would get some points for Lexus in the Manufacturers' Cups, finishing 9th. Afternoon 7 in the Aerodynamics BMW would secure 10th. I would go 11th, falling out of the points. HB Pinder in the Pinder Racing Peugeot would secure 12th place. Harry K5, the Pinker Green Dacia, would secure 13th place, and finally the Speedtrap Motorsports Mazda 3 would secure 14th, with DJ Yuko driving it. Of course, GT out of nowhere would DNF due to his unfortunate lag out, which is a bit of a shame. Moving on to the drivers' rankings then, and they have seen a fair bit of a change, and there's no more ties. Michael in 100, however, still holds the top spot with 131 points, and while he's slightly safer than he was going into these rounds, having just a 1-point lead previously, he's still not completely in the clear. In second place, Prod Forza 4 AMG has 125 points. In third, EVR Invisible AK has 114 points total, with Rhino GT4 securing 4th place with 105 points total. So it's all to play for as we head into our final 2 rounds. Could see a serious shake-up and maybe a surprise victory for certain people. Prod EKR sits pretty much alone in 5th place with 57 points, and I'm in 6th place with 45 points thanks to my 2 abysmal finishes. Racing Kart GT hits 7th place with 39 points, and not too far behind him is his Subaru compadre. In 8th place, Jimmy T996 with 36 points. Harry K5, the Pinketeer, is in 9th with 27 points. In 10th, we have Afternoon 7 with 24 points. And rounding out the top of our scoreboard is in 11th, GTO Out of Nowhere with 14 points. As we move further down the field in the drivers' rankings, Blitz Skyline R34 secures 12th place with 7 points. HP Pinder secures 13th with 5 points. In 14th, we have CR27 Gaming with 4 points. In 15th, we have DJ Yuko with 2 points, and because he was absent for rounds 7 and 8, Azza still holds on to his 1 point, leading him to be in 16th place. Hopefully, though, he has some better luck at Bathurst, and we may very well see a huge switch-up at the bottom of this table. Onto the manufacturer's standings then, and they've seen even more of a shake-up. Volkswagen finally claim the top spot of the manufacturer's standings. However, while they may have 83 points, BMW would rather like their lead back as they poke in 2nd place with 81 points, just 2 points behind them. Honda would secure 3rd place with 57 points thanks to one consistent driver and only having one car. In 4th, we have Subaru with 39 points thanks to a pretty good showing during these rounds. Ford would fall from 3rd all the way to 5th with 37 points. Admittedly, while we still may be able to take Subaru thanks to both my abysmal performance and the Pinketeer dropping off the face of the earth, we didn't do so good in this round. Peugeot would secure 6th with 15 points. 7th would go to Lexus with 4 points, and finally in 8th we have Mazda, who currently have 2 points in the manufacturer's standings. So there we go then, and that is the penultimate round of ETCC in the bag, and it's all to play for as we head into our final rounds 9 and 10, which will take place on the Bathurst circuit in Australia on the 7th of July 2017. 7/7/17 is the date. Of course, that will be taking place at 11 PM British Summer Time as usual. Of course, if you want to watch the race live, you can see Rhino GT4's perspective live when he streams it on his Twitch channel, which I will leave in the description. And as always, anyone's point of view or personal experiences they had in ETCC during rounds 7 and 8 will be left in the description. With that all being said and done, friends, thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, a farewell.